Before Chanukah comes to an end, I want to share a Torah that I saw at the beginning of Chanukah that's really stayed with me throughout, and I feel is particularly relevant for the end of Chanukah, for Zot Chanukah, as this last day is called. This is Chanukah. After all these 8 days, we're finally reaching the point of Zot, of this. This is it. You know, the Zohar speaks about there being a level called Zeh and a level called Zot, a masculine phrasing of this and a feminine phrasing of this. And the difference between Zeh and Zot is that Zeh is a thisness, is a something that still exists in concept, that still exists a little bit transcendently, a little hovering still above our experience, hovering above our reality. But Zot Chanukah, Zot Chanukat Mizbech, it's a this is this, it's a downward this. Like the Chanukiah, like the Ner Chanukah that we light at the lowest place, it's the this that's right here on the ground, the this that we encounter. And in the spirit of Zot Chanukah, I want to share a teaching from the original Rebbe, from Risomi Rujin. And he quotes the pasuk from Tehillim, "Chishavti derachai ve'ashiva raglai elidotecha," which means I've considered, I've given thought to my pathways, to my paths, and I bring my legs, I lead my legs back to your edot, to your mitzvot, to your teachings. So the Rishner says that in these generations, it's difficult for the neshamot, for our souls, to find their fullness, to find their tikkun, their fulfillment, al yidei Torah and Tefillah. It's hard for us to find what we're here to become through Torah and Tefillah alone. I don't know if you can relate to that, but sometimes you're davening and you're learning and you're doing all the things and the mitzvot, and there still is something else that isn't finding its fulfillment. There's some more that you're searching for, that you're needing. And he gives a reason for this. Sorry, before he gives a reason, he says, Ki ma'idei inyanei olam hazeh, shemechaven behem l'shem shamayim. The more that he speaks of is beyond Torah and Tefillah. Our souls need to have an intentional connection to God through our living in this world, through our things of the world, through the matters and encounters and experiences of just our lives themselves. The Shem Shemayim, that this too is godly, beyond the formal Torah and Tefillah, that the living finds a point of connection with God. And he gives a reason. He says, because in this generation, the souls are on the level of what's called raglaim, the feet. And this already goes back to the teachings of the Ari and of Chaim Vital and throughout the Hasidic Sfarim, that there's the souls of the feet. If we imagine all souls of all history somehow as parts of the prototypical body of the first human being, of that Tzurat HaAdam, the human that was created, and that as time goes on, we reach lower and lower to the point where the human soul, the collective soul, reaches the ground, to the place where our souls now collectively are in contact with the ground. We're at the feet. We're at the feet. And he says, so that when a person therefore tries to bring themselves close to God through Torah and Tefillah, listen to these words, Eino batuach be'atzmo. We try all of the ways that we've been taught, that we've received, and there's a piece where I just don't have the confidence that this is enough, that I'm doing it right, that it's real, that I'm enough, that I can do this. Something feels like it's missing. We start to have all sorts of thoughts about ourselves, questions, uncertainties. That in a sense, even when we're doing the thing that we're quote unquote meant to be doing, we still have all these very deep, unresolved, unanswered questions about ourselves, about our very worth and value and connection with God. So there's a feeling that it's just not enough. And he says the only way then that we're able to find our way to God is something beyond Torah and Tefillah, is through Avodat Hashem Begashmiut B'Inyanei Olam Hazeh, connecting with God, carving a pathway to God through our living in the world, through our living in Olam Hazeh, the things that we're physically engaged in, our experience of just doing the things of life. So he goes on and he explains this in this pasuk from Tehillim, Chishavti derachai v'yashiva raglai el edotecha. It says, Chishavti derachai, if I can bring consciousness to my path, to just what I'm doing on the way of life, eating, drinking, all the other things I do in my body as I live here breathing in this earth. Through that, the legs, that soul that is here in the way of a foot, that's existing in close contact to the earth, so that can find its way towards God. Through shining a light onto the things of our lives, finding our lived experience as the place in which we are serving God. Of course, also Torah, Tefillah, Mitzvot, but not to stop with the second guessing of ourselves there, not to second guess ourselves of feeling and desiring more, but to let ourselves use our lived experience as the place to encounter God, one step at a time, as we walk on this path the Rishner is describing. And I just want to relate one more piece here, is that the Zohar speaks of something called the queen who's bejeweled in the kishutin de lo havu. There's jewelry that never was, the jewelry that isn't jewelry. And the Magi Mezerich explains that he says, Torah mitzvot, that's the jewelry that's already been, the beautiful adornments that have already existed until now. But he says, when a person is miyached b'inyanei olam hazeh, when we allow ourselves to find a place of yichud, of unification, of intimate contact with, of finding one space of wholeness, one point of contact in just our lived experience of this world. So here he says, we're dressing up, we're adorning the Shekhinah in the kishutin de lo havu, the jewelry that has never been made before, finding and creating this new beautiful expression of divinity, of God's presence in the world. And so for Zot Chanukah, it's like, here I am, it's almost Shabbos. There's not even Chanukah candles anymore. I'm still going to say Al Hanisim before the day is done. It's still Chanukah, even though all the lights have passed, even though all the mitzvot of the holiday have passed. The direction that lowly lit candle at the doorway brings us toward is to be able to take that step outside the door and recognize and search for the light that exists mamash here in the Zot, in the place that I'm encountering life and reality and experience in this world, in this moment, the place where my foot touches the ground, the place where my body lives in the earth. Here's where I begin and continue to light the candles that never were, to dress up in the jewelry that's never been made before. To find God in the wonder of Zot, of encountering life in this moment, in this reality. Chanukah Sameach, Zot Chanukah Sameach.